I should have known the moment Joseph walked through the door with Elena that this Thanksgiving would be different. My cousin had always been the golden boy of our family, the one who'd made his millions before 30 in tech ventures that none of us really understood, but all of us bragged about to our friends. He'd dated models, actresses, women whose Instagram followers outnumbered the population of small countries. So when he arrived at my aunt's sprawling colonial home in Connecticut, with a woman in a wheelchair, pushing her himself with a tenderness I'd never seen in him before, I knew something had shifted in his universe. Elena Martinez was beautiful, in a way that had nothing to do with the designer clothes or professional makeup that Joseph's previous girlfriends had worn like armor. She had warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and a presence that seemed to light up the room despite the awkward silence that fell over my family as they entered. I was helping my mother arrange the appetizers in the kitchen when I heard the commotion. Well, not really a commotion, more like the sudden absence of sound that happens when something unexpected walks into a room full of people who pride themselves on their sophistication but lack any real grace. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the foyer just as my Aunt Patricia, Joseph's mother, was air-kissing her son while her eyes remained fixed on Elena with barely concealed shock. "Everyone, this is Elena," Joseph said, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. His voice carried that confident tone he used in boardrooms, but I could detect something else underneath, something vulnerable. "Elena, this is my family." I stepped forward immediately, extending my hand. "I'm Sarah, Joseph's cousin. It's so wonderful to meet you." Elena's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Joseph's told me so much about you. He says you're the only one in the family with any sense." I laughed, already liking her. "That's because I'm the only one who didn't buy into his cryptocurrency recommendations back in 2019. Joseph grinned, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "That was one time, Sarah. One time." The rest of the family slowly emerged from their stupor. My Uncle Richard, Joseph's father, came forward with practiced charm, shaking Elena's hand while his eyes flickered to the wheelchair with undisguised curiosity. My grandmother, sitting in her usual throne-like chair by the fireplace, simply stared, her lips pursed in that way that meant she was formulating opinions she would definitely share later. My younger cousins, teenagers who lived on their phones, were already whispering to each other, their screens probably lighting up with messages to friends about the unexpected development. Dinner was still an hour away, and my mother had planned the usual pre-meal mingling with drinks and appetizers. I watched as Elena navigated the room with Joseph by her side, answering questions about her work as a civil rights attorney with articulate passion, while my family members nodded with tight smiles. I could see them mentally cataloging everything about her, comparing her to Joseph's previous girlfriends, to their own expectations, to whatever image they'd built in their minds of who deserved to be with the family's golden boy. My cousin Melissa, who'd always had a competitive streak with Joseph despite being 5 years younger, cornered me by the cheese board. "Did you know about her?" she whispered, loading her plate with brie as if the task required intense concentration. "No," I said honestly, "but she seems lovely." "She's in a wheelchair, Sarah." "I have eyes, Melissa. What's your point?" She looked at me as if I'd asked why water was wet. "Joseph could have anyone, and he brings home someone who can't even walk? What are people going to think?" I felt heat rising in my chest, that familiar anger that came from being related to people whose values I fundamentally disagreed with. Maybe they'll think he found someone who makes him happy. Maybe they'll think he grew up and realized there's more to a person than their Instagram aesthetic. Melissa rolled her eyes. "You're so naive, Sarah. This is about optics. The Thornton name means something. Joseph has responsibilities to uphold certain standards." "The Thornton name," I said slowly, "means that our great-grandfather made a fortune in manufacturing, and everyone's sense has been coasting on his work while pretending they're special. Elena actually does something meaningful with her life. She fights for people's rights. What do you do again? Post sponsored content for teeth whitening strips?" Melissa's face flushed red, and she stalked away, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood floors. I probably shouldn't have said that, but I was already exhausted and we hadn't even made it to dinner yet. I found Elena in the library, a room my aunt had decorated to look intellectual, despite the fact that most of the books were purchased by the foot for aesthetic purposes. She was examining a first edition of The Great Gatsby, one of the few genuine articles in the collection. "Hiding?" I asked, settling into the leather chair beside her. She smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious? Joseph went to help my uncle with something in the garage. I told him I'd be fine, but I think I underestimated how much energy it takes to be scrutinized by an entire room of people simultaneously." "My family can be a lot," I admitted. "They mean well, mostly, but they're also deeply concerned with appearances and status and all the shallow things that don't actually matter." Joseph warned me. He said they'd be surprised, probably judgmental, definitely invasive with questions. But he also said you'd be different. He was right. "What happened?" I asked, then immediately backtracked. "I'm sorry, that's incredibly rude. You don't have to answer that." "It's okay," Elena said. "Everyone wants to know, but most people are too polite or too uncomfortable to ask directly. I was in a car accident 3 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. I was on my way home from celebrating my law school graduation. Spinal cord injury at T10. I have full use of my upper body, but I'm paralyzed from the waist down." "I'm so sorry," I said, meaning it. "Thank you." It was horrible at first. The adjustment, the grief for the life I'd planned, the phantom sensations, the medical complications. But I rebuilt. I finished my residency at the law firm. I learned to adapt. I found new ways to do the things I loved. I started rock climbing at an adaptive sports center. I traveled to 6 countries. I argued my first case before a federal judge. Life looks different than I imagined, but it's still a good life, a full life. "How did you meet Joseph?" Her smile transformed her face, softening it with obvious affection. "Pro bono case. His company was being sued for accessibility violations at one of their office buildings. I was representing the plaintiffs. We were on opposite sides, but he listened during the depositions, really listened. And then he did something I've rarely seen from executives. He admitted his company had fallen short. He didn't just settle, he implemented changes across all their properties, hired me as a consultant, and then asked if I'd have dinner with him once the case was closed." "That sounds like the Joseph I remember from before he got successful," I said, "before he dated women who treated him like an ATM with abs." Elena laughed, a warm sound that made me think of summer evenings and genuine joy. "He told me about some of them. I think he was looking for something that fit the image he thought he was supposed to project, but he wasn't happy." "And now?" "Now he says he's never been happier in his life." Dinner was announced, and the family gathered around my aunt's massive dining table, a piece of furniture that could seat 20 and had probably cost more than my annual salary. Joseph helped Elena transfer from her wheelchair to one of the dining chairs, a process he handled with such natural ease that it was clear they'd done this countless times before. But I watched my family watching them, saw my aunt wince slightly, saw my grandmother whisper something to my grandfather, saw Melissa exchange glances with her husband. The meal started pleasantly enough. My uncle said grace, thanking God for family and abundance and all the usual things. The turkey was perfectly golden, the side dishes arranged beautifully, and wine flowed freely. Conversation bounced around safe topics. Someone's recent trip to the Bahamas, stock market performance, the new restaurant that opened downtown. But I could feel the tension underneath, like pressure building before a storm. It was my grandmother who finally breached the surface. She'd never been one for subtlety, and at 87, she felt entitled to say whatever crossed her mind. "So, Elena, dear," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of false sweetness that preceded something cutting. "Joseph tells us you're a lawyer. How do you manage that in your condition?" The table went silent. Even the teenagers looked up from their phones. Elena didn't miss a beat. "The same way I imagine you manage to run your bridge club, Mrs. Thornton, with intelligence, determination, and a good support system." Her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being parried. "I'm simply meaning it must be very difficult. Courtrooms, client meetings, all that travel. Don't you find it limiting?" "Grandmother," Joseph said, his voice tight with warning. "I'm just asking questions, Joseph. Surely she's used to curiosity." "What I'm used to," Elena said calmly, though I could see her grip tighten slightly on her fork, is people assuming my disability defines my capability. But I've won cases against opponents who could run marathons. My legs don't argue cases. My mind does. Of course, my grandmother said, waving her hand dismissively. But surely you must see this is unusual for our Joseph. He's dated such, active women, athletes, dancers, women who could keep up with his lifestyle. Mother, Aunt Patricia said, weakly, but she didn't actually tell her to stop. I saw Joseph's jaw clench, saw Elena place a gentle hand on his arm, silently telling her she could handle this. Elena said, her voice steady, though I could see her grip tighten slightly on her fork, Mrs. Thornton, I've climbed rock walls, kayaked in the Pacific, and hiked trails in adaptive equipment. I've kept up with Joseph on every adventure we've had together. But more importantly, we connect intellectually, emotionally, and in ways that have nothing to do with physical activity. I'm sorry if that doesn't fit your image of what his partner should be, but your approval isn't required for our happiness. My uncle cleared his throat loudly. More wine, anyone? But my grandmother wasn't finished. I'm only thinking of Joseph's future. Children, for instance. How would that even work? And the social aspects, the galas, the networking events. A man in his position needs a partner who can complement his image, who can... Don't be rude, I said, my voice cutting through her monologue like a knife. Everyone turned to stare at me. I had always been the quiet cousin, the one who avoided family drama, who kept her head down and her opinions to herself. Excuse me? My grandmother said, her eyebrows raised so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. I set down my wineglass carefully, aware that my hands were shaking slightly with adrenaline. I said, don't be rude. You are being incredibly rude and disrespectful to Elena, and by extension to Joseph. And frankly, I'm embarrassed to be sitting at this table right now. Sarah, my mother hissed, mortified. But I couldn't stop. 18 years of biting my tongue at family gatherings, of watching my relatives judge and criticize and tear down anything that didn't fit their narrow worldview came bubbling up. No, Mom, this is ridiculous. Elena is accomplished, intelligent, kind, and clearly makes Joseph happy. But instead of welcoming her, you're all sitting here treating her like she's somehow less than because she uses a wheelchair. Do you hear yourselves? Do you realize how awful you sound? We're just concerned, Melissa said, her tone dripping with false concern. This is a big change for Joseph. We want to make sure he's thought this through. Thought what through? I demanded. Falling in love? You can't logic tree your way through matters of the heart, Melissa. This isn't one of your influencer campaigns where you A/B test everything. You are being very disrespectful to your elders, my grandmother said coldly. And you are being ableist and cruel to someone who has done nothing but try to be gracious in the face of your judgment, I shot back. Elena has shown more class in the last 2 hours than this entire family has shown in years. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the antique clock on the mantel ticking, could hear someone's phone buzzing with an ignored message. Joseph stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Sarah's right. I brought Elena here today because I wanted to share something important with all of you. I was going to wait until dessert, but I think now is as good a time as any. He walked around the table to Elena's side, and then, to everyone's shock, he knelt down on one knee beside her chair. Elena Martinez, you walked into my life during one of the most adversarial moments possible, when we were legally opposed to each other, but you showed me what integrity looked like, what strength really means, and how narrow my world had become. You challenged me to be better, to do better, to see beyond the surface of things. These past 8 months with you have been the best of my life. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me want to be worthy of you. He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond that caught the light from the chandelier above. I don't care what anyone thinks, what anyone says, or what anyone expects. I love you. Will you marry me? The room held its collective breath. I saw tears streaming down Elena's face, saw her hands trembling as she reached for Joseph's face, cupping it gently. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed, and I started clapping, loud and enthusiastic, my applause echoing in the silent room. After a moment, my father joined in, then my mother, then slowly, reluctantly, others followed. But the damage was done. The joy of the moment was tainted by everything that had preceded it. Joseph helped Elena with the ring, sliding it onto her finger, and they stayed there for a moment, foreheads pressed together, existing in a bubble of two while the rest of us faded into background noise. When they finally pulled apart, Joseph stood and addressed the table, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. "I brought Elena here today hoping you'd see what I see in her, someone extraordinary. Instead, you showed her exactly why I've kept my distance from most of you for years. You're so obsessed with appearances and status that you've forgotten how to be decent human beings." "Joseph, that's not fair," Aunt Patricia protested weakly. "Isn't it?" he challenged. "When was the last time any of you asked me if I was happy? When was the last time you cared about anything beyond how my success reflected on the family name? Elena sees me, not my bank account, not my connections, not what I can do for her image. She loves me for who I actually am." "We're your family," Uncle Richard said, his face reddening. "We've always supported you." "You've supported my success because it made you look good," Joseph corrected. "There's a difference. And you know what? Elena's family, who I met last month, who have far less money and far fewer advantages, welcomed me with open arms. They didn't care about my net worth or my LinkedIn profile. They cared that their daughter was happy. They asked me about my intentions, yes, but they did it with love, not judgment." He took Elena's hand. "We're leaving. Elena, I'm sorry. I thought they'd be better than this." "Joseph, wait," I said, standing up quickly. "Don't let them ruin this moment for you both. You just got engaged. Stay. Celebrate. Let me at least get you both some champagne." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the internal struggle playing out across his face. Finally, he shook his head. "Thank you, Sarah, for speaking up, for being the one person here who gets it. But I think we need to go. This isn't the environment I want Elena to spend another minute in." Elena rolled her wheelchair back from the table, and Joseph immediately moved to help her, their practice coordination speaking to countless similar moments they'd shared. As they prepared to leave, my grandmother spoke again. "If you walk out that door, Joseph, don't expect to be welcomed back so easily." Joseph actually laughed, a bitter sound without humor. "Grandmother, that's the point. I don't want to be somewhere I have to walk on eggshells wondering if my partner is going to be treated like a human being or a curiosity. Elena deserves better. I deserve better." They moved toward the foyer, and I followed, grabbing my coat from the closet. "Sarah, where are you going?" my mother asked, appearing behind me. "With them," I said simply. "I'm done with this dinner, and honestly, I'm done with pretending this family dysfunction is normal." My mother looked stricken. "You're being very dramatic." "No, Mom. I'm being honest for the first time in years. I love you, but I can't sit at that table and pretend everything is okay when it's very clearly not." I caught up with Joseph and Elena outside, where they were waiting for their car to be brought around. The November air was crisp and cold, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the darkness. "You don't have to leave," Joseph said, though he smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Yes, I do," I insisted. "Family stands up for family, and you two are more family to me right now than anyone in that house." Elena reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for what you said in there. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did, because it was right, and because you two deserve to be celebrated, not interrogated." Their car arrived, a sleek Tesla that whispered into the driveway. Joseph helped Elena into the passenger seat, folding her wheelchair with practice efficiency and storing it in the trunk. Before he got in the driver's side, he turned to me. "Sarah, I mean this. You're always welcome in our home, in our lives. You're the kind of family worth having." I felt tears pricking my eyes, the emotional weight of the evening finally catching up to me. Congratulations, you two. Really, I'm so happy for you both. They drove away, and I stood there in the cold for a moment, watching their taillights disappear down the long driveway. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably my mother demanding I come back inside, but I ignored it. Instead, I called an Uber and waited by the street, watching the warm lights of my aunt's house, but feeling no desire to go back inside. Inside was judgment and narrow-mindedness and the suffocating weight of expectations that had nothing to do with genuine happiness. Outside was cold but honest, and I'd take honest over comfortable any day. My Uber arrived and I climbed in, giving the driver my address across town. As we pulled away, I looked back one more time at the house where my family was probably still sitting around that table, probably talking about Joseph and Elena, probably congratulating themselves on their honesty without recognizing their cruelty. I pulled out my phone and sent Joseph a text. Have a wonderful engagement celebration without the peanut gallery. You two are perfect together. Next Thanksgiving, I'm coming to your place. His response came almost immediately. It's a date. And Sarah, I thank you for being brave enough to say what needed to be said. Elena hasn't stopped talking about how amazing you are. I smiled, settling back into the seat as the car carried me away from one family gathering and toward whatever came next. Sometimes love meant sitting at tables with people you disagreed with, trying to find common ground, but sometimes it meant standing up and walking away, choosing the family you made over the family you were born into. 3 weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. Heavy cardstock, elegant calligraphy, the kind of wedding invitation that spoke to care and attention to detail. Joseph and Elena were getting married in 6 months, a small ceremony followed by a larger celebration. I was listed not as a guest, but as a bridesmaid, one of Elena's chosen people,